the official report launch for the joint report by GWEC India and MEC Intelligence, Wind, the Critical Link to India's Clean Energy Transition. This report was just launched today and is the second edition of our joint report, GWEC India's joint report with MEC. And we are really excited to show you all the main findings of this report today. And I would like to also just give a special thanks to our sponsor of this report, Green Tech, and a representative from Green Tech will be on our panel discussion later on today. So this the program has slightly changed today. So we'll start off with opening remarks from the GWEC Global CEO, Ben Backwell, and then we'll play a short video and then move into a presentation on the key report findings by MEC Intelligence, and then on to a panel discussion with some really great industry leaders in India's wind power market, moderated by the Director of GWEC India, Francis Jayasuriya. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can submit them using the Q&A button on your Zoom toolbar, and we'll be picking up those questions and asking them to our audience throughout the course of the panel discussion. So with that being said, I'm going to now hand it over to GWEC CEO, Ben Backwell, for some opening remarks. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Elisa. And thank you to our illustrious speakers and industry colleagues, and to MEC Plus for collaborating with us on this important and insightful report. We look forward also a little bit later to hearing from Sumant Sinyard, our GWEC India chairman as well. Now, India is obviously at the moment facing a really unprecedented crisis with the massive second wave of COVID-19. And having lived through this in my own way in the UK for the last year and a half, my heart really goes out to all of you in solidarity, and we are here to, to support you in any way we can as the global industry, and also as friends and colleagues. And I really hope that we will start to see COVID retreat and eventually shrink to manageable proportions by 2022. And throughout the COVID-19 crisis, wind power has been there to keep power running in India and support the economy and its citizens and communities across the country. But we need to do very, very much more. And what we're also seeing now is really the growing evidence of the danger of dangerous climate change, with the devastating cyclones that have hit parts of India also in the last few weeks and months, kind of really adding to the misery. At GWEC, our real hope is that 2021 will be remembered as the year when the world got serious about climate change. And it does look like things are changing. As we move towards the crucial COP26 climate negotiations in the UK in November, the importance of the wind industry's role in stopping dangerous climate change is becoming clearer by the day. A few weeks ago, the International Energy Agency published its Net Zero by 2050 report, and the findings were really quite striking and remarkable, and I think they can be summarized in one line, which is that the world will rely very heavily on the readily available, scalable, renewable energy technologies, basically wind and solar PV, to reach the net zero objective. So there really is, I guess the conclusion of the report is there really is no moonshot. There's no kind of new technology that's going to come along and save the world, at least not in the time frame that we are looking at, which is really the next few decades. And for the first time since GWEC came into existence, and for the first time since I've been involved in energy policy, I can say that the International Energy Agency and the renewables industry is completely on the same page, really for the first time ever. Now, according to the report, and the numbers are actually very similar also in the IRENA World Energy Transitions Outlook, which will be published in the next couple of weeks, global wind capacity will need to increase to 8.3 terawatts. That's 8.3 terawatts by 2050. And at present, as you know, we're something around, we were at 743 gigawatts at the end of 2020. we're probably about 750, 760 gigawatts at the moment. So to do this, we're going to need to achieve annual run rates that are something like 3 or 4 times higher than the current level. And last year was a record year at 93 gigawatts. We're probably going to need 3.5, 4 times that every single year in order to meet the objectives. Now, this is an enormous challenge and also an enormous opportunity for our industry. As we know, India has some of the best wind resources in the world and is already the 4th largest wind market globally. But we're really only scratching the surface of the country's potential to harness wind to power clean and affordable energy and create these vital millions of new jobs and trillions in investment opportunities involved in a green recovery. India is also the world's 2nd largest carbon emitter right now, and urgently decarbonising the country's energy system is therefore essential to put the whole world on a path to net zero. So it's a huge responsibility, and I guess no pressure is all I can say. Wind power is the zero carbon energy source that has the highest capacity factors and the most decarbonisation potential per megawatt installed to help India achieve its renewable energy and climate goals. And even further opportunities will arise as India begins to build its offshore wind market. Now, to unlock the decarbonisation, the economic potential that wind energy can offer India, the right policy framework is key, and that means streamlining overcomplicated auction and permitting frameworks so that we can rapidly ramp up deployment in the country. And as we know, the government's ambitions are very laudable, and we fully support them. But what we really need to do now is go in and implement and speed up implementation and let the investment flow. And this is a problem that we are challenged. We're facing in many, many places around the world at the time of at this time of really channeling the available investment into productive deployment as quickly as possible. Now, at GWEC India, we are fully committed to supporting the government and the industry to overcome these challenges through providing research and insight such as today's report, and bringing together key stakeholders and the industry to work together with government on issues and areas such as grid, tenders and auctions, offtake, corporate procurement, and building a framework for offshore wind. So we have an enormous amount of work ahead of us, but I think we have such a capable and dedicated industry in India that I'm really confident that we can do this and do something very special in the years ahead. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you in this crucial year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben, for those call to action and words of optimism as well, which is really much in line with the findings in this report. So unfortunately, Mr. Suman Sinha, who is the chair of GWEC India, is running a bit late, so he's going to join us in a few minutes. In the meantime, let's move on. We're going to play a short video with some of the key report findings. So let's run that video now. Awesome. So to go into further details about the key findings of this report, I'm now going to hand the stage over to Ms. Swarnam from Mech Intelligence, who is one of the lead authors on this exciting report. So I'm going to now hand it over to Swarnam to go into these key findings.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, and welcome everybody to this session where we are doing this virtual launch of our Wind Outlook 2025. I'll just share my screen and just give me a second. Yeah. Just a second. So sorry for that, a slight glitch from my side. So moving on, we will be sharing the key insights from our report, Wind Installation towards 2025. This is a second installment of our report that we did the last year, where we were looking at outlook towards 2022. In the latest installment, we have looked keenly at the developments that have happened in the last couple of years in the market and how do they reflect towards 2020. So starting with the key highlights of the report, the India wind market today stands at around 39.2 gigawatt of installations in the market as on end of 2020. In the year 2020, we saw installations of around 1.1 gigawatt happening against the anticipation that we had in the last volume of the report of 3.3 gigawatt. Majority of the installation and the anticipation was hit by the COVID-19 crisis in the market, wherein around 2.2 gigawatt leaked the year 2020, and around 1 gigawatt of this was cancelled because of the excessive delays that these projects and unfeasibility that these projects were facing, and around 1 gigawatt of this volume moved towards 2021, where these are expected to get installed in the next year with some delay happening. Towards 2025, we anticipate a volume of 20.2 gigawatt to get installed in the next 5 years, in line with the historical trajectory of the wind installations in the country. However, some of the external shocks continue to impact the market, including the COVID crisis, the supply chain shocks related to the cost escalation, as well as the transmission evacuation delay related shocks. If these shocks continue in the market, we are expected to see a conservative case of installation of around 14.8 gigawatt. However, if these issues are resolved actively towards 2025, we might even see the market overperforming itself and moving towards an ambitious scenario of 24.4 gigawatt of installations in the next 5 years. In the short term, this forecast is driven by the pipeline of projects or wind projects that have been awarded in the last couple of years in the India wind market. India has awarded around 16.8 gigawatt of capacity in the last since 2017. And out of that, around 10.3 gigawatt of pipeline is currently active, which is yet to be commissioned or which has not been cancelled or delayed in the market. This 10.3 gigawatt is expected to remain resilient in the market in our base case scenario. However, the external shocks that we just discussed, if these actualize and continue to impact the volumes, around 30 gigawatt of volume can slip out of this pipeline in the conservative case, leading to a pipeline of 7 gigawatt. In addition to this pipeline, we anticipate another 10 gigawatt of volume getting awarded in the several new wind as well as hybrid auctions in the next couple of years. And in the conservative case, we anticipate around 7 gigawatt of such volumes to be awarded in the next couple of years. The new volume creation in the market originates from the core driver of the wind installations in the country, which are non-solar RPOs. So the non-solar RPOs are basically the solar renewable purchase obligations in the market, which are required for fulfillment of certain RE targets in the market. Right now, we have a RPO target of around 10.25% in the non-solar category, which is expected to go to 10.5% towards FY22. However, the trajectory ahead of FY22 has not been notified, which creates some uncertainty around actually how will the non-solar RPOs pan out towards FY25. If that leads to the creation of some scenarios around how the new demand for wind will open up. In the base case, we anticipate the non-solar RPOs to go up to 11.25% and create a new demand of around 22.6 gigawatt of wind procurement in the next 5 years. Because there is uncertainty around the trajectory of the new RPO notification, the estimates in the conservative to the ambitious case vary between 17.7 gigawatt to 29.7 gigawatt. Currently, India has a RPO compliance level of around 60% against this RPO trajectory. And this is expected to continue in our base case scenario of where installations of around 20.2 gigawatt takes place. This can even accentuate to around 80% in the ambitious case, or can go below 50% level compliance in the conservative case. In addition to the core driver of the market, which is the DISCOM procurement, a new untapped market remains a potential area of exploration for wind installation in the market, which is the corporate PPA market. Right now, this market remains small and nimble, with marginal installations on a year-to-year basis. To date, we have around 9 gigawatt of installations of wind under the corporate procurement mechanism, majority of which happened under the AD mechanism in the pre-2012 era. However, the corporate market continues to wake up to the benefits of the wind as well as hybrid formats in the market, as the initial demand of corporates are met through solar and requirements of grid balancing emerge. Wind is expected to be a natural progression into the demand of CNI integration. There are multiple incentives as well as charges to this corporate market, and new models keep emerging to be able to bypass or to be able to resolve these challenges around corporate PPA. In the corporate PPA, if the corporate PPA market is really uptaken by the market, by the wind procurers in India, we can anticipate our ambitious case moving slightly upwards, or we can move some volume, expect some volume moving from the auctions towards these corporate PPA markets. Towards 2025, not only is the market reboosting itself and changing in the volume composition, it is also changing in the composition in terms of what is the nature of the market. Right now, majority of the pipeline is driven by the out of the 10.3, 7.6 is actually driven out of the standalone tenders, and majority of the 39.2 gigawatt has also been installed under the category of standalone wind. However, we see this changing towards 2025, where there is a requirement for a quality power at a certain time of a day at a certain price, which can be fulfilled by hybrid auctions. Even the nature of hybrid auctions is changing, where it is moving from an objective of solely increasing the CUF of wind and solar integration towards providing firm and flexible RE to power off-takers in the market. We continuously keep publishing such insights on our website and keep talking about these new trends emerging in the market. You can write to us at info@mecintelligence.com in case you have any further questions here, or visit us. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you so much, Hornam, for that. Really, I know it's hard to condense that big, huge report into a quick 10-minute presentation. But the good news is we have the CEO and founder and also lead off with the report as part of our panel discussion. So we can also go over that in all those findings, which Hornam just went over in our panel discussion. Great. So looks like we have now been joined by Mr. Sumant Sinha. So I will, if you could turn on your camera, Sumant, that would be awesome. So for those of you who don't know Sumant, he is the chair of GWEC India and also the managing director of Renew Power in India. He's currently in New York though, so thank you, Sumant, for joining us so early, New York time, and I'll hand over the stage to you now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alyssa. Look, I'm really delighted to be here at the launch of the report on wind in India. I think it's, and the outlook out to 2025, which is of course the flagship report by GWEC and MEC Plus. And it's the third in the series and comes at a fairly, I would say, critical time, especially given the fact that everything has been disrupted on account of the COVID pandemic. And that actually in some ways also makes the road ahead a little bit uncertain. But while it is uncertain, it is also extremely critical that in the next 5 years and the next 10 years, that renewable energy really steps up as being the critical instrumentality to deal with climate change. I think it's an absolutely critical time period for us. And I think everybody is now recognizing that what we do in the next immediate 5 to 10 year time period is going to determine the trajectories out to net zero, and therefore how much carbon we emit in getting to our net zero targets by 2050 or 2040 or 2060, depending on the country that has set the particular target. And so therefore, in some ways, I think the whole issue about the criticality of immediate action has become a lot stronger than it was earlier. India itself, as we all know, has set a target of 450 gigawatts by 2030, which is an ambitious target. Some may say too ambitious and will not be met. Others will say perhaps not ambitious enough. But my sense is that it's a practical target. I think it takes into account the issues of both on the one side ambition, and on the other side also looks at some of the practical difficulties of the India's power sector and issues of intermittency management, and also the issues of how not let me say that it's not easy to do projects in India. So I think it takes into account those realities as well. Of course, as we all know, one of the biggest things that has to be done in India is reform of the power sector, the distribution utility sector. And that, to me, is the crucial pivot around which a lot of growth in the power demand will manifest itself. So let's see what the government does. They certainly have certain plans and targets in that area. Those need to be moved forward. Those need to be actioned over the next 2-3 years. And when I look at the power sector in general, I think the other exciting things that are going to happen are going to be around the areas of storage and, of course, the area of hydrogen. Now, I think storage is more imminent. Perhaps in the next few years, it will become much more common. Hydrogen will take longer, but I think certainly work will start into that, in that direction. So I think both storage and hydrogen are extremely important because they will, in some ways, expand the envelope of what renewable energy is actually able to achieve. Storage will allow us to increase the amount of renewables in the grid. Today, as we know, in India, it's only 10%, but the plan with 450 gigawatts is to get it up to about 33, 34%. There will therefore be issues around intermittency management that will come up, and that's where storage is going to play a bigger role. And hydrogen, we know, will extend the envelope for electricity within the energy mix, and perhaps will become much more important beyond 2030. So the question therefore becomes one of what is going to be the role of wind in all of these things. And to me, it's actually very interesting. And I think what has emerged over the last year to year and a half, particularly, is the fact that wind has an extremely critical role to play in the issue of balancing the grid and balancing solar out and doing it in a clean way. And so, for example, we'd won, our company Renew Power had won a tender last year for round-the-clock power, which is a very innovatively designed auction on the part of the government, where they required the developer to deliver about an 80% plant load factor on average across the year, with a certain minimum across various months. And the only way in which we were able to do that, or sort of optimize the cost, was essentially to have a much higher degree of wind in that project, in that particular bid, actually, than solar. And so therefore, we essentially find that the role of wind is really going to be enhanced in these kinds of bids, where you have to combine different sources of generation, of renewable sources of generation together to deliver higher plant load factor solutions, which are more easily absorbed by the grid. And then over time, bundle in storage as well. And of course, storage costs, as we discussed, are higher right now. They'll come down in the future. But in that interim, I think wind has this very important role to play of minimizing the requirement of storage. And I think, therefore, what is now emerging is that you can't just keep doing solar, which, of course, as we know in India, is perhaps cheaper, and the cost curve is pointing downwards as well. Although, of course, not in the very near short term, but certainly in the long term is. But wind has this very important role to play in balancing the grid. And I think that is going to be the way it has to evolve. Now, having said that, there are a number of issues also with respect to wind execution in India. And those really are around the fact that we just don't have enough execution capacity in the country right now. We don't have enough people who've measured wind. We don't have enough people who have execution capacity in wind, and so on. And so therefore, I think that's an issue that really we all need to collectively look at as an industry. We have to find ways of increasing the envelope as far as execution of wind projects is concerned. And we need to have, I think, also a continued reduction in the cost curve on wind turbines, which is something that, there was a step change downwards in terms of overall cost per kilowatt hour in wind. But now with increasing commodity prices and so on, that's a little bit come to a halt. And the reality is that, wind is competing with other forms of renewable energy where cost curves continue to point down. So I think that is an area that we have to really look at. So I think there are significant opportunities for wind as we go forward, but there are equally some near-term challenges that need to be overcome. And I'm pretty sure that they will be overcome. I think it's just a matter of collaborative effort between all the parties involved on the wind side. And I think as long as that happens, we'll probably continue to see the continued evolution of wind. So I think in general, there is a very significant phase of growth, I think, coming up for wind in the near term, which will be driven more by the higher PLF, renewable energy solutions, hybrid projects, round-the-clock power projects, peak shifting projects, etc. And of course, on a standalone basis as well, certain distribution utilities will continue to buy wind as well, and that will happen. The prognosis for offshore wind is perhaps not as attractive or promising simply because of the cost issues. I think at some point the government will have to bite the bullet on that and allow the development of some of the offshore wind farms, which can then start developing the ecosystem and bringing down costs. So I think that will happen over time, but I think it will take some time. And I think beyond that, we all need to get together collaboratively to really try to bring the costs of wind down in the country. And I think if we can do all of that, we'll probably see very promising growth for wind in the near term. Repowering is something that may or may not happen. We've looked at it in the past. Of course, as wind turbines age, that is something that will also become perhaps a possibility. But I think one of the good things about the wind sector in India is that all the manufacturing happens in India. So it's very much part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat, mentality, philosophy, etc., that the government is trying to impose. And so in that sense, wind is very much of a domestic industry. So I think it's very important for all of us to work together to make sure that wind continues to grow, the job creation in the sector continues to happen, and it continues to become part of or stay part of a very important part of the overall renewable energy paradigm, and works closely with some of the other sources of renewables to provide these more balanced solutions. So let me pause here, and before I end, let me also just say that it's great to have GWEC in India. I'm delighted to be associated with GWEC. It's obviously been a terrific platform globally in pushing forward and advocating the use of wind. I think in India as well, it's great to see the work that GWEC is now doing, and particularly with respect to reports like this, which really highlight the road and the way forward. I think it's incredibly important because we need to continue to do this kind of work to demonstrate to the government, demonstrate to all the stakeholders the important role that wind has to play in the evolution of renewable energy in the country, and lay out all the issues, problems, and opportunities. So I think from that standpoint, terrific work. I'm really glad to see this report coming out, and I congratulate everybody involved with putting it out. And it's great to have the session with all of you. So thank you very much, and glad to be part of it.
Thank you so much, Sumant, and very well said. I think that provided a really great kind of context and overview to kick off our panel discussion. So I'd like to ask all of our panelists to now join us on the virtual stage. And we will kick off the discussions to dive deeper into some of the topics that Sumant just outlined earlier. So I'm going to head it off to Jay, who is the director of GWEC India, who will introduce the panel. So over to you, Jay.
Yeah, thank you, Alisa. And I really have, as Mr. Sumant has said in his opening remarks, that we have to people bring together, and exactly we have eminent panel speakers over here, which carries the erudite experience from the sector, which they are coming from IPP, OEM, and market intelligence, and the market intelligence. With that saying, so this panel session is going to be with 5 questions, which I'm going to pose across to all the panelists, and I'm sure they will carry out their key messages and come out with their message for the radical change in the future as we try to move India towards the renewable sector. With this, I just like to pause for a minute and have a self-introduction. May I start with Mr. Ramesh to start with for a self-introduction?
Yeah, good morning, good evening. Yeah, I'm Ramesh Kaimal, currently advisor to Adani Green Energy Limited, driving the wind strategy. And earlier I started up Vestas in India, and after that Siemens Gamesa. So I've been in the wind business almost from the time it started in India, that is in the mid-90s. So here I am, and I'll give my little bit to this.
Yeah, thank you, Ramesh, and that's what I said. You have carrying a legacy now, and with that, I will ask Sandy Khera to just a few words of introduction.
Sure. Thank you, Francis. Hi, I'm Sandy Khera. Firstly, it's a sheer delight to be part of this panel and this entire event. So thank you for having me here. I'm country manager and CEO for Enel Green Power India, a part of the Enel Group, which has a presence across generation, distribution networks, and digital technologies. In renewables, we have about 49 gigawatts of capacity installed in more than 30 countries across technologies, including wind, which is about 18 gigawatts. So as far as the energy transition is concerned, EGP is playing a fundamental role in that as one of the leading renewable energy companies in the world. And India is a key growth market for us, and we see huge potential for renewable energy, including wind. Currently, we have an operational capacity of about 200 megawatts and about 800 megawatts of capacity under development and construction. So look forward to an engaging session with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. And may I request Siddharth Jain to share his introduction?
Thanks, Jay. Welcome everyone to the panel discussion. I'm running MEC Consulting, and we have been working in the renewable sector for the last 10 to 12 years. We started working in the European market and worked with some of the largest IPPs in Europe and OEMs in Europe on strategies and business planning. And since the last 6-7 years, when the market has started to pick up in India, we've had a large number of companies invest into India. We focused, done M&A and strategy, and very glad to be associated with GWEC in bringing out our insights into this market today.
Thank you, Siddharth. May I request Captain Kishore, the Director of Green Tech?
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for inviting me in. I am the alternate eye in this panel, if I may say so. After a good close to 50 years of experience in maritime and oil and gas sector, as Mr. Kaimal said, I possibly now become a believer, and I've converted myself from I should not use the word dirty, but a conventional sector to the renewable sector. And I have co-invested with some friends in Green Tech Megawatt out of Coimbatore, and that's the capacity I am here for. And yes, I would love to hear from all of you, as well as share my experience from the forerunner, because almost all the things that wind and solar industry does, the components are very similar in the marine industry and oil and gas industry. And all the hitches and problems that you're going through now, that industry is also gone through. So we have a history which can act as a data to you going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kishore. I'm sure we will take up your experience while sharing the panel discussion. So with that, the first question to all, I'll start with Mr. Ramesh Kaimal. India Outlook report estimates around 20 gigawatts of wind installation in India the next 5 years, that is 2021 to 2025. How do you see the next 5 years for the wind energy in India with the impact of the COVID-19 and escalation price like steel and other raw materials? And maybe you can add the tariff also. So over to you, Mr. Ramesh.
Yeah, thank you. The way I see it, the market will be in the region of about 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts going forward for the next 5 years or so. At least that's what we see from the company that I am now in. And the steel prices have gone up, I agree with that. But then there are certain advantages in having wind, and not only advantages, there are some things which you cannot avoid in the hybrid system where you need wind. And so it will be able to absorb some kind of increase. But at the same time, one of the points that Sumant Sinha had touched upon was that India has 10 gigawatts of manufacturing capacity in India. Actually, if you dig deeper, the problem is that the components and the downstream supplies are really not available in India. And after a certain megawattage, you have to import it from outside the country. And that adds to the cost. So to truly bring down the capital cost, we have to indigenize in a very, very aggressive manner. But then it's a chicken and egg situation. If the market is not there, the component manufacturers are reluctant to come to India. And so we have to create a market where the market is large enough for these component manufacturers to come, or the OEMs take up the onus on them to give some kind of guaranteed offtake from so that they can come in. What I'm seeing now is a lot of exports happening, and the cost benefit is definitely there. But it also indicates to another thing, that the prices we discover in India are much lower than the prices that you can discover in the West. So that answers part of the problem that we have today.
Thank you. Siddharth, I just wanted to move on to you because you have projected this 20 gigawatts for the next 5 years, and the same way, how you feel the next 5 years in the wind sector, and particularly adding to this impact on the COVID and the other prices going up.
Yes, thanks. So COVID has had a major impact. I mean, one of the things that has been happening is that cancellations have been happening in the projects. And a lot of these projects which were cancelled were primarily bid at very low tariffs. And over the last year, the tariffs have kind of stabilized a little bit, which has led to a lot of power supply agreements getting signed. And we expect that, you know, if the steel prices would have not escalated to the level that they are, that the installation would start to pick up. And eventually, as the indigenization is under play, I mean, if you look at OEMs, a lot of OEMs have a large amount of supply chain which is setting up in India, and then export-oriented supply chain has also been set up. So with the volume picking up and the tariffs stabilizing and with hybrid absorbing some of the cost, the upside has been there. The only thing is that with the changes that have been happening in terms of the cost plus the COVID, that creates a bit of uncertainty in how the market can resolve. Then also there is additionally the RPOs which are not yet notified beyond 2022. Then the transmission infrastructure is not very well defined beyond a certain time period, and there will be some delay once the initial transmission infrastructure is laid out. So I think as an industry, if we look at the demand that is out there for renewable, that is huge. But in terms of the way the demand will go year on year, that will continue to change, sometimes because of external shocks, sometimes because the policy will require to be clarified a little bit more as compared to what it is today. And, you know, especially around the transmission and the wave-offs that have been kind of are there until 2023. If they do not continue, then it will be a big external shock. So it is quite interesting times, and a lot of dynamics are changing. But one thing is certain, that we require renewable, and the amount of renewable that is required is going to increase only going forward. So that will continue to drive the market. But there are, and as all the panelists have been saying, that there are these shocks that are there, which needs to be for anyone kind of plan and mitigate.
Yeah, thank you, Siddharth. And Sandy, I would like to add on Siddharth's thing, like how he brought into the forecasting. So can you just add on your comments, Mr. Kaimal's inputs and Siddharth's inputs?
Sure, Francis, and thanks. So as Ben said in his opening remarks, that 2021 has probably been the year of like recalibration, right? We're picking up the threads and then putting into motion the wind execution activities back on track. Of course, the resource constraints caused by COVID and the disruption in the supply chain also, which has put suppliers under financial stress, all these have contributed to the pace of execution coming to a standstill to a large extent. And the commodity prices increase have also not helped the cause. So in that backdrop, as the report also suggests, I think 2021 and 2022 will be the years when the backlog of the projects tendered in the past will be brought on track, right? So, and there will be, in all likelihood, some pullouts or some short closing of the PPA. So we still believe about 75-80% of the backlog will come through, which means you'll add about 7 to 8 gigawatts by 2022. And the good news is that new tenders are still coming to the table, right? Whether it's plain vanilla or hybrid, we will see more of hybrid. And if you put all that together, you could see another 8 or 10 gigawatts in the next 3 years between 23 and 25 coming in. So altogether, you could look at 15 to 18 gigawatts coming in. But as Siddharth said, there are a few assumptions that underpin this capacity addition, right? Which is that first, that the ISTS charges and losses waiver extension has to be extended beyond 2023. If that doesn't fructify, it will put some of the projects at on hold and at risk, right? Then also the other is because of these delays and financial stresses and the cost increases, I think the DISCOMs will also have to take into stride the fact that PPA costs might increase, right? So you will not be making headlines for lower tariffs with every bid. So that realization has to come through for some time at least, and that the need to sign and honor PSAs, PPAs, and make payments on time becomes even more imperative right now. And then, as Suman said, to remain competitive, we will need to continuously work with all stakeholders across the supply chain and with all the ecosystem of partners to bring down the LCOE. But then again, I'm very optimistic. If you add conducive policy around banking, etc., you could see the corporate PPA market open up, because you have corporations who are very focused on ESG and have signed up for the RE100. So you see a lot of opportunities from that market also emerging. So the 18 to 20 gigawatt number is achievable, but subject to the caveats that we talked about. Yeah.
Thank you. Captain, I just want to ask you your experience. You're coming from the oil industry. That have you faced any sort of this crisis, and how you feel that the wind industry has to work with a blended version of yours?
It's excellent to hear the data coming from all the experts in this field. So let me add the historian to this data analysis, because that makes it more effective in the overall sense. So let's say that Siddharth was talking about massive demand. Yes, oil and gas, when it came in, also saw through a massive demand. We are talking about COVID as an adverse effect. When oil and gas was growing, the industry saw 2 world wars. Nothing can be more adverse than that. This possibly is like a third world war with an external enemy whom we can't even see, but we will get over it. Humankind found when we went from shore to sea to deep sea, somehow we found the oil and got it back. It was expensive initially, it got cost optimized, and now all of them are the same. Whether you buy it is sold in barrels, depending on which part of the world it comes from. Having said that, I completely believe that the humankind will find a solution out of this adversity and move forward. That is number one. Number two, when it comes to cost optimization, which Mr. Sunna very, very correctly pointed out, I will go back a little more further than the oil and gas industry, which is just about 150, 200 years old, to the maritime industry, which is donkeys years old. If I may say so, even maritime industry started the change in the manufacturer or the shipbuilders being just that. The rest all gets transferred to the either first party or third party asset managers. When that comes in, competitive spirit builds up, and then the quality of service goes into a completely different tone. So Mr. Sinha was talking about repowering may not be an immediate answer, and possibly extension of life cycle could be a very good answer, which happened in the maritime field. Suddenly the ships which were 25-year-old were being pushed on for another 25 years, and they yielded so very well. Entire the maritime sector of Greece grew in such a large proportion thanks to that. So there is historian which says that we will come out of this adversity absolutely winning. So I'm quite sure this industry will go offshore. Already there are so many things that's happening. Norway is taken the boot. I mean, my erstwhile company, Kongsberg, is one of the major players in that. And we, as a humankind, will find solutions. That's my take.
Yeah, thank you. That's why no wonder that most of the oil companies are moving on to the renewables now. With that note, I will just pass on to Mr. Kaimal for the second question. I want to know how the wind role will be changing when India is moving from 25 to 30% RE to the end to 50-60 RE on the grid in 2030. So what is the role of like your companies like yours plan to do for this integrated energy system?
Yeah, so like I said, the first point is that wind turbines have to become more competitive from the capital cost point of view, which with aggressive indigenization, it will happen, and it is happening now. As it is, we are seeing that a lot of international OEMs, large ones, are using India as a base to export. And that itself is increasing the interest from the OEMs, from the component suppliers to put up their shop in India. So one is the capital cost. The other is, see, let's not forget the fundamental truth. The truth that is there for all of us to see is that for India, we have no other alternative. We do not have oil, we do not have gas, our coal is of poor quality. So what was the driver at that time remains the driver even today. And that's not going to change. And it's only becoming worse because energy security is a big question mark, and the balance of payment issues are coming in. So what is happening is that the government's focus is slowly shifting from tariff-driven to the fact that we need power to grow and to grow our GDP, and we are willing to compromise a little bit when it comes to tariffs there. So that is where I see the big growth coming in the years to come.
Thank you. Sandy, can you just add on to Mr. Ramesh Kaimal's point?
As Mr. Kaimal said, that there is no other alternative, right? I mean, to decarbonize the energy system, it's crucial to meet the climate change targets. We have no option. I mean, we can't, and to meet the demand requirements, we can't go back to the carbon-free fossil fuel plants. And from a cost standpoint and from a go-to-market standpoint in terms of timelines, gestation period, renewable energy and wind does make a lot of sense, right? So also if you look at the transmission infrastructure that is being created, we have green corridors that are coming on, and to optimally utilize that, wind plays a very effective role. I mean, you have solar in the day, and then wind during the evenings and night. It not only kind of helps you better utilize the resources, but also helps in balancing the grid. So there is a strong case, and as Sumant had said earlier, and Ramesh said, there is a strong case to utilize the existing manufacturing capabilities also that we have for wind in India. So, and not to take away the potential opportunities you have for repowering and offshore, which we haven't even explored the tip of the iceberg. So, but as far as NL is concerned, I mean, for us, the fight against climate change and the path of decarbonization are very closely linked to NL Green Power's core business, which is to produce green energy, to reduce the CO2 emissions, and provide access to electricity to where it is not available, right? And make businesses sustainable. And as part of this diversification strategy, we work on all renewable energy technologies, including wind and combinations of wind, solar, hybrids, wind, solar storage. We welcome the RTC combinations as well, tenders that are coming on. So we are very keen to look at all possibilities to look at growth of wind in India and participate in that growth story.
Thank you, Sandy. Now I just ask Siddharth, because you have been working on the financial models of many companies and helping that. How do you feel this, the 50 to 60% in 2030 will be achievable from your point of view in a quick share?
So a couple of things. I think a lot of the supply chain companies, especially when I talk to the OEMs, they still are living in the subsidy and, you know, the sort of world where a lot of incentives were there. I think that period of incentive-driven growth for supply chain is gone, and there, you know, the maturity is gonna come towards wind, and irrespective of wind or solar, you know, all of these becoming more exposed towards merchant risks, towards being kind of supporting the grid, towards helping solve discoms and the customers the problems that they face, you know, in terms of whether they want a base power plant, you know, a power plant which is, you know, kind of contributing towards base load, or a power plant which is contributing towards peak power, a plant that is, you know, exposing them to, you know, not a full 25-year PPA, but maybe a 10-year or a 3-year PPA, or so on and so forth. So I think that sort of change will happen in the market, and the supply chain needs to kind of also kind of contribute towards that, because it was an exceptional period where there was so much support that has been given, where, you know, you just need to put up a project and you're not exposed to any risks. But I think the amount of risks that are going to happen will be higher, and that's where the change will happen, where all the companies need to kind of become more smart and more risk sharing oriented, and we will see cross investments and stuff like that, vertical integration happening. All of that will happen. It's going to be very exciting how the market will consolidate and grow going forward.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we are just almost getting closer to that thing. So I like to combine the last two questions to one. As you know, that last couple of years, there has been a challenge on PPA signing, transmission augmentation, land policy alignment, which was a big piece. With this scale of, expected of 4 gigawatts per year, what is the next 5 years do you anticipate, and what are the intervention the government has to deploy that? So may I start with Mr. Ramesh? I mean, you have gone through all this graphics of plus and minuses. So
Yeah,
what do
yeah.
you feel that?
Yeah. My hair has become gray.
No, that's the wisdom, sir. That's a part of the wisdom.
Yeah. So thank you. See, in 2017, the auctions were actually suddenly introduced. Why I'm saying suddenly is there was a lot of talk of auctions and all that, but it was introduced from one day to the other, and without really thinking through how it should be. It was not that well designed, to put it mildly. So that created a lot of confusion in the market, and feed-in tariff just vanished from one day to the other. So people were left with a lot of inventory, and there were a lot of other problems which I don't want to go into right now. But to give credit to the government, they immediately took some corrective actions. I wouldn't say immediately, they took corrective actions. And we have seen a lot of those issues being sorted out one after the other, whether it is land, whether it is delays in transmission connection, interstate connection, etc., etc. But still, the policies are not, that conducive right now, because we are ignoring the elephant in the room, and that is the discount. And the government somehow is reluctant to let go of the discounts in all the states, and state electricity being a state subject, the states have the final say when it comes to that. So that is actually dragging down everything. The center is pushing really hard to ensure that this is happening, but somehow that is not percolating down to the states. So we need to start this so-called grassroots revolution once again, and go to the states and ask them to have these regional auctions or whatever, where you get a better price realization depending on the wind regime of that particular state, rather than going into just one area in Gujarat and one area in Tamil Nadu. But the scope is fantastic. The potential is almost 7 lakh megawatts, and we have just tapped about 45,000 megawatts out of that. So you can see the potential onshore. The offshore can come later, but onshore itself, the potential is so high. So that's it from my side.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. And Sandy, can I just, I mean, you've been working as a developer, so how you feel that the deployment or the intervention, as you also had the impact of this the project's challenges. Could you quick nutshell, can you just tell, because we are running out of time and I need to have one more question down.
Sure. So very quickly, I think, as Mr. Kaimal said, I mean, the DISCOM financial health remains a concern, so that needs to be addressed. I think more importantly for us, I mean, the incidents of PPA renegotiations, etc., that make headlines for the wrong reasons, send a very wrong signal and a negative signal to the investor community, right? As global investors, what we look to have is a stable, consistent, and long-term policy certainty and a conducive regulatory environment, so that we have certainty of cash flows. I mean, all the policies may not be very favorable, but as long as they are clearly known and there is clarity, we can manage our risks accordingly, and there is no surprise. So I think when we're looking at new projects, I think there needs to be more visibility on the tenders upfront to enable developers and OEMs to together plan better to present more competitive and intelligent bid. Have simple procedures for land acquisitions, permits, approvals, and right-of-way issues, which become a huge nuisance later on. Mostly there needs to be convergence and coherence between the central and state government. The central government seems to be very committed to resolve issues, but the state governments need to be more forthcoming on that front as well. And even on projects being tendered out and PPAs being signed, if there is greater coordination and there is upfront procurement planning that is done between the state and the center in terms of demand, and then the bids are announced, at least it will save the risk and delay of signing of PPAs. And like I said, all we're looking for is clarity and certainty. And so that would be my take on or ask from the government.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. And I think now India has a capacity of the 10 gigawatts, and it was not been utilized, and it's been still on a sustainable basis. I just want to know what sort of innovation business models and investment for the project should come across now to Siddharth, and we can wrap up with this question with everybody contributing.
So I think going forward, we would want to have specific tenders which are coming for peak power and base power. That is in terms of the offerings that everybody should have, virtual PPAs and corporate PPAs. How to kind of put them together and help companies meet their sustainable development goals. I think that needs to be developed as an offering. In terms of innovation, the amount of turbines that are there in India, they are not in sync with what is happening globally. So if we can kind of remove the trade and non-trade barriers and see the supply chain getting integrated, that will help quite a bit.
Yeah, to Captain Kishore, would you like to add some points here?
Nothing much. The quintessential optimist that I am, I would see that the changes that the government is making, though is not as agile and as fast as that we require. But even in the oil and gas sector, they have made changes. They have removed a lot of barriers. And I think kicking on from where Ramesh is coming from about indigenous manufacturing and things like that, which will take you to the other goal. I'm quite sure that we are in the right direction. How fast to an effect that we can attract global players very fast into the country, I do not know. But I'm quite sure the end is there. When, we do not know.
Thank you. So Ramesh, with this, you have been in experience in a lot of the OEM and now into IPP. So what sort of business model and new innovation or investment India should look forward for?
No, like I said earlier also, what we need is electricity, power, and it has to come from renewable energy, both solar, wind, and we will also need a little bit of storage. Storage is expensive, I know, but maybe some other form of conventional power, whether it is pumped hydro or thermal power, which is idling, it has to come in, and round the clock power can easily be made a reality with the technology improvements that are coming now. So that is one area that needs to be pushed very, very aggressively. And the other thing is that we have completely ignored biomass, which has a pretty bad history in the past because it was not, again, designed properly. But if you have a dedicated forest for biomass, then it has been a success in other parts of the world, especially in Europe and Spain. So that's, Spain. So we can use that model in India because we have got a lot of land which is not very fertile, which can be utilized for that. And that could be a good balancing source of power for renewable energy, that wind and mainly wind.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, it is very nice to see the panelists, but unfortunately, we are overshooting our time. So may I request Alisa and hand over that. I don't know whether we'll have time for the question for the panelists, but make sure that we will answer to all the questions through the email.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Jay. And thank you to all of our panelists who joined here today, to Ben and Suman Sinha, who also joined us, and Swarnim earlier on. I think we were just getting started on the discussion, and I probably could talk for hours about this topic. So, but unfortunately, we need to wrap it up here. But thankfully, we have this amazing report that we just published today that you can download and read more about all the topics we just discussed over the past hour. So if you scan that QR code right there, you can go to the report download page, and we also have contact information on that page if you want to get in touch with us and MEC Plus if you have any further questions on the report. I'll end it here just to let you know that this webinar was recorded, and we will send out the slide deck and the link to the recording in 24 hours. So thank you all for joining us today. Please download the report, and I hope you have an amazing afternoon and evening. Thanks, everyone.